Okay. Alright. Now that I've got that all situated, apologies for taking a moment there. But, yeah, we're all good now. Alright. Alright, okay. Boop. Alright, so going into chapters 26 and 27 for today. Yeah, so what happened? The group went up to what's recently been going on with it. Group's gone up to see a local seer in the town of Philodne, and she, for the main character for Jaharo, has a vision of what he thinks is Vanine and Hardwin, his two friends that he's looking for. He relays it to the group, and the group goes and starts heading out west to continue the trek to get to Saemine, which I guess I'll bring up the map. So, okay, there we go. So, Philodne is right there, right in the center, and they're going to be trekking their way to this bridge, and then Saemine, where Saedra's shrine is, and stuff. So, yeah, that is what's going on. So, chapter 26, The Appearance of Fate. Daylight, reflecting off the melting snow, forced the party to shield their eyes, fearful of going snowblind. The day continued to warm more than they had expected. Footsteps and lines from the wheels of carts, made by traveling farmers and their families in the area over the previous days, created a look for the main road that resembled the craters and marks of Liana, only muddier. The rolling hills continued, with the occasional farmhouse, barn, and grain silo cropping up short distances away from the road in each structure. Every now and again, someone was outside tending to their animals, straightening up, or busying themselves with some other chores around their land. Whenever someone noticed the traveling group, they gave a quick, acknowledging wave before returning to their own duties. Off in the distance to the northwest, the jagged maw of the mountain chain, the Kierhart Mountains, slowly began to tower above the horizon, glistening beautifully in the daylight. Thank goodness for all this melting snow. Wouldn't know how to feel if we weren't mucking it through this muddy soup. Tamelia sidestepped a squishy-looking mound, and she planted her foot, but still slid, causing her knee to lock up. Luckily, with a quick shift of her hips, she saved herself from falling. Are you all right? Josephine shot her a concerned look. Yeah, I'm fine. I just don't get why those two have to think that leading this march has to be done way out in front like it's some foot race. She pointed to Jahar and Malam, who were some 80 paces up the road, before turning around to warn Dieter and Ripson, who were some 40 paces behind her. She paused for a moment before carrying on with her warning by pointing out the area. And those two behind us being grumpy old men, I thought we were going to march together. Well, you did tell them if they were going to prattle on like a couple of honey-drunk bees about religion, they should do it back there. This time, the farmer maneuvered around a slick-looking crater and warned the following two. She grumbled out loud. I'm not going to take it back. I can do without all their stuffy talk. Then don't go complaining about something that you yourself caused. I just thought we could all talk about something else other than making music or religion. Can't force people to talk about something if their hearts aren't set on it. My husband does this with anyone who has interest in talking about the gods or ideas about life. The young woman slowed her pace enough to match the farmer's. Doesn't that get boring? Josephine chuckled to herself. I'd be lying if I said it didn't, but it's something he enjoys. Better for him to go on about it to other people than for me to have to hear it again. I lost count well before my hair turned gray. Now that you put it that way, she sighed. Now that you put it that way, she sighed. What do you like doing? Being so far from Clohall and your farm? What's something you enjoy? I thought you'd never ask. The rear guard of the group remained a short distance behind the others, while keeping their eyes set on their surroundings. Dieter squinted to the right and left, with a periodical glance backwards. Ripson's eyes darted in one direction, then they would snap to a different, without any sort of rhythm. They sought out any hidden danger lurking in the snowbanks, or near some hills, or anywhere they could perceive any possible origin of harm. Make some notes on some stuff. Okay. Snow and mud squeezed under their boots as the two older men navigated around sections of ice-covered snow, like ships avoiding icebergs. Where the browns of the road bled through, the monk scowled at his feet, while the farmer maneuvered around another mound. Peculiar thing weather is. Dieter tapped the toes of his boots at a particularly large stretch of the road peeking through the snow. Ripson shifted his attention to his marching partner. No more peculiar dirt here than those plains south of Clohall. Only in that I figure the snow wouldn't be so hasty to leave us. This is what I would expect from my own farmlands, and hope the wheat and barley had the fortitude to not be frozen or drowned from the melt, had it been an early snow. A truly thankless endeavor, I imagine. What, farming? Yes, all those untold days and seasons spent to feed yourself and others. The monk's eyes caught Tamilia, waving like she'd been attacked by a bird. He raised his hand to acknowledge her warning. And in some ways, I'm jealous of her and Jahoro. The old man brought a hand to his chest and suppressed a laugh. To see the world through fresh eyes is a lovely experience, yet it does tire one out quicker than expected. Is that why so many of the elderly are the way they are? He glanced at his marching companion, but continued to check the area around them, whenever the moment allowed. Time wears everything down. Dieter peeked to his left, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Except death. Ripson's stoic gaze shifted to a more grim visage. Don't know what I'm doing there. But new life springs forth from death all the time. Even in places like deserts, life is defiant in the face of all that death. Time wears even death down. But death doesn't ever appear to be receding. It's much like winter's approach. Old life perishes, new life takes root. Perhaps deserts work much in the same manner, but on a much larger scale. Though for all our lives and the days that they consume, we'll never see the truth or falsehood of your assertion. From experiencing the seasons to learning of the ebb and flow of various kingdoms and peoples, I would say my assertion is well anchored, like a reasonable conclusion, and not in some inchoate supposition. Ripson laughed heartily, drawing attention from the two women ahead. He waved them off. Fair enough. I've been through the farmlands you hail from quite a few times, but never once has anyone ever mentioned such a scholarly duo. The farmer exhaled through his top teeth slowly as he scratched at his neck. And I don't know all the greatest fruits and vegetables I've grown in my own gardens. Where are you from, then, you feel so comfortable to question me about my wife and myself? For the first time on the journey, the monk, in an act of contrition, bowed his head and offered a sincere apology. I apologize. I didn't mean to question and doubt your words so much as to try to understand the people I'm traveling with in these uneasy times. With gray, steady eyes, he studied the monk for what felt like a lifetime before bowing in return. Apology accepted. What is making you feel so uneasy? War with old Teo. The Sol attacks have been light but constant, and who knows if there is more trouble to come from the south. Those are some of what worries me. You mean from Bruntiel or Kolug? I know there was trouble some years back in the region, but from what I've heard and seen, and heard, why did I flip those two? No, what I've heard and seen. The trouble never did spread beyond Kolug. It stayed localized, thanks to the efforts of the Alranian Empire. Perhaps there are some other concerns here in Perail you'd like to tell me? My wife and I aren't terribly aware of the happenings here. Clohal's political families and their decisions always buzz so prominently in our ears. Similar dangers could easily be found here, I'm afraid. Are those the ones that make you feel uneasy? I hope not, but I'd rather the perception of danger be there than to presume it's not at all, and go about my day like my brothers and sisters have chosen to do. Rather to be excessively prepared and paranoid than to be the unprepared fool, I take it. It is a fair assessment to make. Dieter snorted. I have heard plenty about the followers of Atumu. However, I would like to hear directly from one about what happened a couple generations ago. In detail. Tell me what you know, and I'll provide the answers you seek regarding my life and my wife's. A southwestern breeze weaved its way across the fields, as Jaharl and Malam clutched at the straps of their packs. They glanced to the south, but redirected their attention forward once they realized nothing of note was coming. Leading the march for the two had been much like what they anticipated, straightforward and not overly strenuous. The road meandered like any other, skirting around the midsections of hills. At times it curved this way and that, but nothing too wild to trick the two away from the path when the trackings of local farmers disappeared, even though they were more engrossed in talking about music than fully concentrating on the road to the Great Bridge of Perail. Having tied his spear to his carrying satchel to free his hands, Jarl plucked at the strings of his lute as he mused over its sounds and vibrations. With fresh ears and a newer perspective, he mentally parsed out each pluck, each strum. His fingers bounced from one position to another as the sounds flooded his soul, flushing away some of the musical malaise festering within. But the tune his heart sought out to play still eluded him. Hoping you would find your new tune so quickly, Malam stomped on a small mound, forcing out a spray of snow and mud. In a way, yes. The Marian flicked at some of the strings. I know it's greedy, but it would be great to lift that weight from my mind. Surely with enough practice, it'll happen sooner or later. Rather the sooner over the later. Furiously, he plucked at the instrument in no particular order. Maybe I'll get something out of this musical chaos. Other than noise? The boy grinned at him, who answered with a sharp glare. Don't tell me you truly believe fiddling like you are, like a fish out of water, is going to solve your musical riddle, or do you? Oh, why not? He pulled the protective cover to his lute to his front to stuff the instrument away, but a steady hand from his traveling companion stopped him from doing so. You know, that would be like running wildly through a forest to escape from being lost. Charles stumbled as he planted his foot on a slick patch, but recovered without tumbling. Did you go through that exact same situation no more than a handful of days ago? Reflexively, Malam ran his hand along the back of his neck and sides of his neck. I did, which ought to add weight to what I said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pick at that scab. He shook his head, dispelling thoughts simmering in his mind. No, it's all right. I brought it up. I escaped with my life, but it doesn't change my opinion. You'd be wagering too much of your talent and time on lucking into the melody you seek instead of plotting a proper course. Spreading his arms out widely, the Mahrian scanned the area, not looking for anything in particular. Don't you think this whole ordeal will help me figure that out? The boy ran his fingers through his hair as he tracked the directions his friend was looking. That sounds more like a plan that explains why many never reach the goals they aspire to achieve. What's the point of a goal if everything is thrown to the winds? He opened his mouth, but had no answer to give. Don't you think that's odd? The goal is what matters. If you don't leave your mark, some lasting legacy, everything you do leading to nothingness is a waste of time, a waste of energy, a waste of one's life. The boy's breathing grew heavy as each word became barbed with thorny hatred. His pointed passion prickled through his calm demeanor as he clasped the hilt of his rapier tightly. Seriously, if you're not striving to achieve your best, the goals become empty promises, and there is nothing worse than a broken promise, especially to yourself. Concerned, he held his lute and quill in one hand and placed his free hand on his shoulder's front. Are you certain you're all right? Malam continued stomping forward out of range of the comforting pat, with no regard for any ice in front of him. I'm fine. I'm only bothered by how others go about their lives without a care in the world, and some of us are saddled with all their own responsibilities along with theirs. Don't let those with no goals or making no effort in obtaining their own weigh you down. They'll drag you down to their level with their apathy, like some sort of plague. Jarl rubbed his cheek as he staved off a somber expression from settling on his face. Are you sure you're all right? You sound hurt. He shot his traveling companion a contemptuous glare, his eyes dripped with disgust. I told you, I'm fine. Simply worry when I see people who could do much better, don't. If only they realized the shackles they clamped on them were so easy to break, it would make things so much easier. I'll keep that in mind, but I'm not sure I agree. Take of it what you will. I'm not going to argue with you about it. And so I shall. Then let's leave it at that. The pair took a few steps in silence. Jarl considered stowing his loot away, but opted not to do so. Its cover loosely knocked into his pack with each step he took, but he ignored it as best he could. His grip on his instrument remained strong, but the music had fully fled his fingers. A groan escaped the Marian's lips. So, Malam, why aren't we seeing nearly as many tracks coming or going through here? I thought there would be a lot of traveling through this area since we're getting closer to the Great Bridge. Saemine and Perael Castletown are roughly the same distance as Flodnay is from the Great Bridge, so we're in a bit of a dead spot. Wait, they're that far away from each other? He had forgotten the information that had been said just the day before. Malam's pupils drifted to one side, recounting memories of setting maps of Perael and surrounding lands. About. Dolaire is far to the north, much like how Torness is north of Riversplit, but Saemine and the capital usually stay in much more frequent contact with one another. Flodnay may be better situated for visiting all of Perael's neighbors, but even that hasn't benefited the town much. Even with the war to the east, Perael has dealt with it as one deals with a leper. Even with the moon troop set to perform so soon? I mean, I understand winter is practically here. Jarl gestured to the snow around them. But I'd figure they would attract more attention from travelers. In larger cities, there are plenty of foolish deeds to get lost in. And let's not forget, Saedra's calling has been plenty reason enough to celebrate and travel. You're right to say that winter is breaking down the door, but it gives people an excuse not to leave their homes and get lost, or worse. The Saeminian cast a sideways glance. I guess the people of Mahri truly aren't aware of how special the calling is. People against the tradition have been jailed and hanged for insults against it. Deception against the beloved goddess is dealt with swiftly and with intense hatred. Charles swallowed and remained quiet as his friend continued his ramblings, like a cart being carried off into the distance by a runaway horse. Josephine and Tamilia maintained the steady pace set by the group's current leaders with little trouble. While not too difficult, their steps, being marred by slipping and sliding, had turned the trek into a more dogged one compared to yesterday's trip or the one to Eovir's. Like a bulging vein, the dirt of the road stuck out more and more as the day transitioned from morning to midday to mid-afternoon. McCall shined fiercely as if possessed to rid Perel of snow for even one more day before winter stormed back. What had been a sputtering southwestern gust had morphed into a constant, unending breeze with a hint of warmth from the deserts of Rowan, seemingly wafting in the air, or through the air. Not too much ahead of to the west, the structure accompanying the Great Bridge of Perel jutted upward, like a stone rod shoved into the ground. Let's see here. Its glaucous colored stones blended with the Kerhart Mountains farther away to the northwest. The appearance of the structure infused the group, despite their segmented form, with a livened step. Good on the boys, Josephine pointed to the two ahead of her. They didn't let their shared interest in music completely derail them from staying the course. We'll reach that big bridge well before dusk. Amelia raised her hand to shield her eyes. A whispered gripe slipped through her mouth. Not too difficult to do when the path is practically marked for them to follow. Better to praise than to belittle, I guess. She pointed in the direction of the bridge and the tower. It's hard to tell, but the Great Bridge and that tall building looked similar to the ones in Clohall. Josephine squinted and stopped for a moment before restarting her march west. If I recall, their building was a gift given to Perel as a promise of trust between the two lands. It looks like they used the same blue stones from a quarry not too far from my own farm. Really? She squinted harder and leaned forward. I think so, but it's a little hard to tell with the mountains behind it. Yeah, those are some large mountains, much larger than the ones Mahri is on. They're called the Kerhart Mountains. I see. Who is Kerhart? The young woman scratched her head. Honestly, I don't have a clue. Shame. Then what about the ones Mahri's on? Well, that could get you in some trouble. Why is that? No one agrees on a name. They'll call it anything but what someone else wants to call it. Weird. So we just call them the mountains. No one wants to settle on a name? Fine. We won't even use one for them. That's one way to go about it. Josephine frowned before surveying the mountains once more. Those Kerharts are much angrier than the ones where Mahri is as well. Amelia chuckled. Aye, sharp like the teeth of some nasty adder. The farmer nodded, while her thoughts drifted under her home. It's amazing how they moved all those stones here. The poor horses and oxen had to drag all those stones across Perel. Was this before the main road cut through the folial forest? Oh, I have no clue exactly how it happened, but it wouldn't matter if this road was around at the time or not, because they could have taken the southern road instead. To me, they hopped over a muddy puddle. Not quite. Well, they did have animals helping. They also used barges and boats of all sorts and sizes. They took the rivers to the south and came north. Really? She stopped walking for a moment, dumbstruck by the imagery popping in her head. I can't imagine lugging around those heavy stones across the water, like how we ferried across the Grinnell and River Split. That sounds really dangerous and tough. Certainly, but life and living it means different things to different people at different times. Josephine spied the quizzical look she was being given. The names of all those individual builders are probably lost to time. The act's results still remain for us to marvel. They also challenge us to surpass them in their own ways, in our own ways. I guess that's one way to look at it. Do you have another? The young woman tapped her thumb on her chin. I don't know. Kind of makes me think of the bees we take care of in Mahri. Josephine laughed softly. If I didn't know any better, I'd swear you weren't a person, but only a collection of bees, as much as you talk about them. She faced the farmer with a blank look. Maybe I am, Buzz, but... Help! Maybe it wouldn't be like that. It'd be like, help! One moment, Jaharl and Malam were lost in chatter about musical performances the same Menian had the privilege of witnessing. In the following, as the road bent around the foot of a moderately sized hill, the duo were stopped by a group of 4 haggardly dressed men, threatening them from not too far off the road. They stood roughly the same height, tall and spindly, malnourished due to the Great North's disdain for crops and lack of numbers from wild game, avoiding the salt camps. Greasy strands of blonde hair draped about like worn-out mops that had been adhered to their heads. In their hands, a collective of bent bronze weapons pointed at the two young travelers. One of the four stepped forward, still a few paces away from the road. He peered down his nose at the two as he lifted his hatchet and pointed it in their direction. A twisted smirk bent his mouth as he watched the pair step backwards. He barked out a few words in his mother tongue, which, to the Paralians, sounded more like he was spitting out stones than garbling out any coherent words. When no response came, he repeated himself in a harsher tone and gestured for the others to flank their next victims. Flat-footed, Jahar clutched his lute as his spear remained tied to his satchel. His eyes locked onto the leader as his brain flooded with considerations of what he had to do. Run away? Malam might be too slow. I could easily slip. Can't unfasten my spear in time. Do I stall and hope the others aren't too far behind to help? Stall them? How? He stood rooted in place, using his lute as a makeshift shield. Help! Malam screamed, but did not run away, as though his feet were buried in stone. The leader leapt forward, swinging his hatchet wildly. He started to approach Malam before pivoting to his true target. However, his weapon caught Jaharl's lute's soundboard, severing the strings and producing a wretched sound that punctuated the air. The attacker jumped back, yanking the instrument from Jaharl's hands. As it crashed into the mud and snow, the other Saul used it as an invitation to strike. The three others approached with murderous intent. They only took a couple of steps forward as two of them crumpled to the ground, croaking sickly cries. The surviving one, still standing, screamed as he darted back behind the hill. He flung his weapon without an extra moment's worth of thought and sprinted, as far as his legs allowed, in a northeasterly direction. Arrows harried his footprints, pressing him to run harder through the muddy snow. As Jahar stood dumbstruck, looking at his lute like some broken dream, Malam regained his composure, panting. His pupils rattled as though they had loosened and uncontrollably shook about in the whites of his eyes. In his beastly daze, he clutched the hilt of his rapier close to his body, like how one would hold the front of their tunic close to their breast, anxiously. A hum filled his ears as the boy's vision tunneled from the heated rage filling within his heart. He pivoted abruptly, facing the remaining attacker, who was wholly focused on splitting his victim's head in half after his failed attempt. Malam's breath, hot with violent fury, oozed out in a long exhale. Then, with blade brandished, he stabbed like a bolt of lightning the side of the neck of the attacker, drawing a muted cry of anguish. He yanked his sword free and pulled his arm back to strike once more. Before another strike was made, Dieter arrived on the scene and grappled the boy, disarming him in the process. The farmer pulled him away from the bloody rapier as it landed in the dirt and snow near the dying trio of attackers. Tightening his grip, he easily moved them some distance away from the carnage, while watching Ripson inspect the fallen assaulters with a scowl grooved onto his face. Damn awful luck. The monk moved the head of one of the slain back and forth as he studied the face. Oh, hello, Slade. Hello, how's it going? And thank you. I know I texted it earlier, but thank you for the birthday wishes. He rubbed the forehead, trying to polish a bolt clean. Dissatisfied, he shoved the head into the dirt as he stood up. He pointed at the two who suffered arrow wounds directly below the clavicle. That sunk deep, missing the rib cage. You're wickedly accurate, Josephine. Remind me not to fall on your bad side. She feigned a composed look momentarily before she bit her lower lip as tears welled up in her eyes. I don't enjoy hurting others. Joking about it's not something I appreciate. Tamelia bolted to her friend's side. I'm doing well, thanks you. I'm doing pretty good. Thank you. We'll get the hoot of the owl. It's a real hoot. Tamelia bolted to her friend's side and examined him from head to toe, lifting his arms and cape while he stood dumbfounded. Are you all right? Those bastards didn't cut you or anything, did they? A low growl was Jarl's first answer, as the words he wanted to say perched themselves in his throat. With the flick of the wrist, he pointed a withered finger at his broken lute. Better the lute than yourself, though, right? She tugged at his arm before clasping his shoulder tightly. From what we saw, you used it pretty well as a shield. There we go. Jahar shot her a nasty glare. You think being funny is going to help right now? A little bit. If it hadn't been for Josephine's aim and lightning quick draw, you would have had a few cuts and pokes in you. Maybe even worse. Might as well laugh at a danger that's come and gone. He turned and stared at his destroyed instrument, soaking in a muddy puddle. His upper lip scrunched upward, as though he had bit into something sour. A slow exhale, like air forced out of a squeeze box, gave Jahar time to reflect. How are we going to afford anything? When will I get another chance to buy a new one? Is this fate's way of telling me to no longer bother with music? Or is it mocking me for even trying? And this gets out of the thought into speaking. I'm sorry, you're right. I'm being ungrateful. You all right? She watched as he shed her grip and approached Josephine, who was squatting next to one of the fallen attackers and muttering a soft prayer. She wrapped a tuft of her hair around her finger and tapped the side of her head with her fist. Did one of them conk him on the head and I didn't see it? The old woman remained unmoved as Jahar walked up to the corpse and joined with an unspoken prayer. They stayed locked in that position for a while, with nary a look nor word exchanged between them. During their silent procession, Ripson examined the bodies and weapons more thoroughly in hopes of gleaning some information, but sparse details told him no more than what he had witnessed. He picked up Malam's rapier and, upon noticing the boy was still restrained, approached the pair. Once within range, he slapped the boy in the face, which caused everyone to look over toward the three. Care to explain why you felt the need to silence one that could have given us some details on them? Malam only stared back at the monk. His eyes projected nothing but the violence he wanted to commit. His reddening and throbbing cheek did nothing to douse the rage. No answers, huh? Ripson drew back to strike the boy again. Don't! Dieter did not move himself, nor Malam out of the monk's range. He needs an answer for that barbaric demonstration, and I'll beat it out of him if I must. And who are you to administer such a punishment? Are those slain Saul or not? What does that have to do with blatant murder? The man, was he Saul or not? Or does your blind hatred for this boy preclude you from answering? The pair stared intently at each other, seeking some subtle clue as to what thoughts were forming in the other's mind. Well, he looks the part, but we'll never definitively know. And you think Malam somehow has the answer? I do. Certainly a leap if I've ever heard one. Dieter released his grip, but kept his eye on the monk. Go on, Malam. Answer him. He won't be satisfied until he has one. For a moment, the boy slumped on the ground, like a wound-up toy that had lost its momentum. His chest and shoulders heaved up and down as he gulped air. As the infuriated monk stepped forward, readying another slap, the boy lifted his head, revealing tears in his dark eyes that had welled up before cascading down his cheeks. I'm sorry, Ripson. He stepped back with a scowl. But his scowl did not lessen. I'm not seeking an apology. I want an answer. Explain yourself. Malam forced himself to a more comfortable position and took a series of short, sharp breaths. Then, he stood up and faced the borderline raging mass before him. They were some of the ones who kidnapped me. Before another question was ready to be asked, Tamilia moved closer to the three. They were part of the group? They all didn't travel with you and moving you through the forest? Malam solemnly nodded. I didn't realize some stayed behind. They had covered my head with a small sack after they overtook my carriage. Then why did you not warn us? Yeah, we'll change that. Then why did you not warn us? Ripson bellowed, the question digging his ever-growing anger into each word. Maybe I ought to take your head clean off or not. But I did tell you that it had happened after the bridge. Quite honestly, I don't recall that detail ever being mentioned. Either you remember that? He shot questioning looks at Dieter and Tamelia. He said something about it the night we rescued him. She nodded and glanced at the old man to hear what he had to say. Truthfully, I don't recall the specifics. Dieter tugged at his beard. I vaguely recall the bridge being mentioned, but I also don't see a reason to lie. It's not like he is a Saul, are you? I'm not! Other than to save himself from me breaking his neck like a twig. Then keep my rapier until you deliver me home. If you're so afraid I may, in some lapse of judgment, confuse those who helped me with those who've harmed me and lash out, keep it. I'm less afraid and more think it's foolish to trust a snake who's already bared its fangs. Ripson's grasp tightened on the hilt of the rapier. His lip curled upward as he pressed his tongue against the roof of his mouth. Malom shook his head. I don't know why you have this great distrust for me. The sword quivered as the monk gritted his teeth. You know exactly why. The boy laughed, piercing the air with a hint of disdain. Now you can read minds? Are all your brothers and sisters of the faith as paranoid as you? Ripson stormed off in the direction of the bridge and held the rapier aloft. You'll get this back when I deem it appropriate. I hope it won't be delivered into my back when you do. Malom spat at the monk's footprints. When he didn't hear any response from Dieter, he turned to catch the farmer staring at him, like he was stuck in a trance. Don't tell me you're siding with that maniac. His expression did not change. Never said I was. Well, that is good, though I don't know why you travel with that mad dog. He barks and snaps at phantom provocations. Dogs do have a funny sense about them, don't they? Dieter made his way to his wife before Malom had an opportunity to respond. Once he was beside his prying wife, he turned to Jaharl, who was trying his best to continue in silent prayer with her. Go with Tamelia and Malom to the Great Bridge. My wife and I will take care of cleaning up here. Jaharl opened his eyes slowly. What had been a softness in his look had now morphed into an emotionless stare. Are you sure? Yes, we'll be fine. We'll reach the bridge before nightfall. But what about these fools? Dieter wagged a lazy finger at the corpses. Wolves or something will get a decent feast. Nature must have its meal after all. I see. Still somewhat in a daze, the Mahrian lifted himself to his feet. You aren't hurt, correct? He nodded toward the jumbled mess of an instrument. Only my dreams. The farmer patted his distraught fellow traveler on the shoulder. He leaned in and whispered into his ear. A dream lost is a small price paid in the promised pain of life. Jarl pulled away with his brow furrowed, not quite certain he heard what was said. Huh? A weak smile surfaced on the old man's weathered face. It'll make sense when you're older. He answered with a grumble. It doesn't quite clear that up. And the fog doesn't immediately dissipate when the morning's light first hits it. I'll take your word for it. He glanced around and spotted his friend standing awkwardly as she tried to preoccupy herself. Come on, Tamelia. Come on, Malom. I'd say let's catch up to Ripson, but let's give him a wide berth. It'll be like following a spring storm. Malom kicked at a clump of snow. Better to follow it than be caught in it. Charles grabbed the boy by the arm, but he yanked it out of his grasp. I'm not hurt. I can walk fine enough on my own. All right. He put his hands up into the air. Let's go then. Tamelia? She stood by watching before shaking herself free from a growing trepidation within her chest. Sorry. The muted trio shuffled forward to the great bridge of Perail, the symbol of Perail and Clohal's brotherly promise to one another. They refrained from speaking as the two Marians couldn't muster the proper words to possibly soothe Malom's visible agitation. The splatter of the mud and snow became their trumpets, announcing their approach, as a faint rumbling sound off in the distance refused to allow quiet to fully return to the troubled area. The southerly wind deserted them, and, for a moment, they each imagined themselves trekking across the surface of Liana as Jaharl and Tamelia had their weapons at the ready. Dun, 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 dun. That is the end of chapter 27. Yeah, so the one of the, at least what I feel in this one, as opposed to Sudraba. So as this is going further in, and there'll be much more going on in part 2, is that there's a lot more of these very poignant stabs, we'll say. And the one here with Dieter about a dream lost is a small price paid and the promised pain of life. I really like that line. I think that is one of the lines in this whole thing. I was like, oh yeah, I really like that line. that is some, as for some people would say on the internet, that is some coping. That's a coping line, but I don't know. I think that is a very. I like that line a lot. And in some ways, maybe it's comforting when things don't go your way. I don't know if it necessarily would be that, but or a reassurance. But yeah, like that is such an oof moment, and not meme sound oof on the internet. But yeah, so this is obviously a very, very crucial chapter, and you're kind of getting the vibe of the 3 different pairings, and not only are you getting the vibe of the 3 different pairings as they are, but it is, like I said, it is the appearance of fate. So this is the chapter title that I feel like, oh, this is really good, because words are funny in that they have a lot of different meanings, and that's what I'll say. Words are funny because they have a lot of different meanings. So I was just like, oof. Yes. So I may have failed on remembering to mention some of the things I know I did last time, but I will. Let's see here. I will mention if there's anything. Doesn't seem to be. I don't think, yeah, because there's a lot of I feel like I've yeah. I think we're good. Because I'm looking at it, there's like for the index, there's something for chapter 21, but I didn't talk about chapter 21 in the last recording. And then the next one's chapter 27. So, which is what's next. So exciting times. And that, yes, so we will do chapter 27 here. It is a bit shorter. Chapter 26, it was, yeah, it was, yes. All right, so, but, yeah, so I would say that it, maybe some people won't like the idea of it, but I think because it's now technically it's going to be a trilogy, the pacing is a little bit different than, because it feels like when you try to have the pacing, it's like, oh well, one book it has to have this thing, and maybe I'm being a little too quote unquote novel, but I really feel like the stakes should have that little up ping, but they shouldn't be like up ping and then, oh look, you're in the part 2 and it's kind of a similar thing. I think once I get done with at least part 2, 1 and 2 are are kind of like one big, not one big, it is the one story, and then part 3 is almost like an addendum, um, in a way. Not fully, but I think that's maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I don't know, but I think having parts 1 and part 2 become almost like it's just one story itself, because technically it is, and I didn't want to make like really tiny font to try to compensate for it. Like part 2 is already a whole bunch of pages and stuff, so it's like so I don't even know what that was about, but so here we are with chapter 27. Chapter 27, The Great Bridge of Perail. Despite being down in a ravine, the constant sound of rushing water from the Gariel River reached the tower structure on the western side of the river. Stone stacked upon stone, the tower stood some 7 stories tall, with a roofed brazier at the top, like a lighthouse plucked from the shores and planted in the middle of a sea of fields. The river did its best to avoid the surrounding natural landscape of the increasingly towering foothills of the Carhart Mountains. It flowed through the chasm it had dug out over millennia, its protective home, with little in the way of meandering. The tower was manned by a few dozen soldiers, with space available for travelers from all over Perail and beyond. A small 2-story building, serving as the barracks, attached itself to the western side of the tower, which served as a sort of gate to ensure certain dangers, like the Saul or possibly Altean spies. Altean is probably a better way to say it. Altean spies were not given easy access to the heart of the kingdom, at least from an easterly direction. True to his promise, Dieter and Josephine arrived shortly before dusk, completely conquered the sky. They marveled over the great bridge as they stepped onto the stony connection. Though it was wide enough across for 7 people to comfortably walk over, the elderly pair stayed closer to the center, as there was no proper railing to keep some poor soul from falling if they stumbled near the edge. They stopped briefly to gaze out to the north and south, and took in the fleeting beauty of the western portion of Perail before nightfall concealed it. After taking a moment to appreciate the dense forest to the southwest, and the earthen sentinels to the northwest, they acknowledged the guards currently on duty, standing slightly beyond the abutment on the western end. "Halt!" One guard tapped the butt of his spear on the stone road beneath his feet. "Were you not informed of our arrival?" Always. I can never escape my phone. I really need to mute the thing whenever I do any sort of streaming or recording. It gives an impression that I'm actually shut up, please. Thank you. Okay. Good gracious. Were you not informed of our arrival? Dieter grumbled before addressing his wife. Do you think they forgot to mention us? A particularly nasty gust of wind cut across the bridge. Instinctually, the farmers grabbed onto each other by locking arms. "At least let us get off this bridge," Josephine hollered. With a free hand, she pointed to the side. "You see us as we are. If we fall off here, we'll drop like a couple of boulders, straight into the river down there. If it's names you need, Ripson, a monk of some repute, and 3 younger ones arrived here not too long ago. Their names are Jaharl, Malam, and Tamelia. And I am Dieter, and this is my wife, Josephine." The guards on duty motioned for the farmers to step forward. Once across, most of the sentries remained alert, while the one who addressed them led the arriving duo to the tower. "Is everything all right?" She looked to her husband, who didn't say anything. "Nothing to report, ma'am," the guard said, not realizing she wasn't asking him. He continued his stride uninterrupted. "Your traveling friends are inside. Ripson is in his own room, as well as Malam, which is a miracle even returned to us. Praise be to Liana and her guidance. The other 2 are somewhere in the tower. They didn't seem ready to rest yet." "You know of Malam's plight?" Dieter focused on the guard's back. "No, I watched the damn thing happen." The guard fumbled with a ring of keys before finding the one he needed and unlocked the door. "We tried to save him, but those filthy Saul were waiting far enough beyond the bridge for us to see it. but not be able to do anything about it. If you don't mind my prying, what happened? Just as I said, I'll spare you the details. That poor driver didn't deserve it, though. Those damned Saul will get what's promised to him. Filthy bastards. With a curt gesture, the guard waved them inside. Food straight ahead if you're hankering for a meal. Thank you. Josephine followed her husband through the outer hall, which was shaped like a ring, and entered the center room. Around the circular room, numerous tables, fit for smaller groups, populated the area, like a few garden patches in a field. About half of them were occupied by guards dressed casually, after having recently finished their own duties for the day. Soldiers nodded at the farmers as they passed by. On the far side, there was a cart housing dishes and some different foods for dinner. In one large clay bowl, small slabs of pork drowned in a thick brown sauce. Another equally sized bowl held a thin porridge, speckled with glazed chunks of peaches. Leaves of grilled purple cabbage stacked messily on a plate next to the porridge. The last dish, containing food, housed a pile of white beans, peppered lightly. Not too far from there, the young Mahrians sat by themselves at a table off to the side. Upon noticing Dieter and Josephine entering, Tamilia bit down on a bite of beans and waved at the farmers. Hey, we were just wondering if you two would make it before nightfall. Josephine sat in the lone chair, while Dieter sought out his own. Fortunately, one of the neighboring tables only had a single guard enjoying his meal. The farmer caught the man's attention and pointed to the empty seat, which the soldier motioned it was free to take. Didn't trust us. Dieter sat down with the others. I told you we would arrive before dark. One of the nearby farmers actually saw some of what happened and helped us bury the bodies. Josephine looked at the pair's dishes of food. What are the rules on the food? We're starving. Don't stuff yourself like a pig in a forest of truffles. Jahar deliver that differently. Don't stuff your face like a pig in a forest of truffles. Jahar rolled a leaf of cabbage around a strip of meat and bit into the wrap. The sauce caused him to cough as he swallowed. Careful of the sauce. It's a bit heavy on the seasoning, I think. Still holding on to that dour disposition? Dieter placed his hands on the table. I'm trying not to. He took another bite. Better to try and fail than to not try at all. The farmer jumped to his feet. He gestured for his wife to stay seated. Don't worry, I'll get you a plate as well. After he left, Josephine leaned over the table toward the younger pair. Don't mind him if he's a little snippy. He's in a grouchy mood, filling his stomach ought to fix him up. He's right to be. Jarl answered. It's all right. Tamilia replied simultaneously. The two exchanged a pair of glances. Being right doesn't mean he should barrel down a cliffside like a rock slide. She touched Jahar on the arm. And just because something's truthful doesn't mean it needs to be spoken either. Sometimes the fun is seeing others figure it out themselves. Jarl exhaled through his nose. A weak smirk formed on his face. You certainly have a way of saying things to clear our troubles, like daylight after the rain. I do try. That's all we can ask of ourselves. The woman rubbed his shoulder before patting him reassuringly. Better to hold yourself as the most demanding one in your life. Better to hold yourself as the most demanding one in your life. Dieter sat down down a plate for himself and another for his wife. If someone else is, you'll be at the mercy of whatever winds they blow. I don't even remember writing that. I kind of like that one. That makes sense. Tamilia nodded while looking at her friend as he finished his meal. He swallowed quickly. It does, but it still doesn't help with fixing my loot. The farmer bit a strip of meat in half and winced. He peeked out the corner of his eye and noticed his wife had a similar reaction. My advice to you is to concentrate on what is at hand. Receive the blessing if it comes to that, and until you find your friends, treat your pursuit of the musical like your loot. Leave it by the road until you can return to it. The table grew quiet as the two farmers dug into their meals. In between bites, conversation from the guards' chatter punctuated the air. From comments about recent training to observations on the day's warm weather to the recent rumors happening at the nearby quarry, as well as on the war front in Alteo. The tone of those conversations did not carry one of gloom on darkened wings. In fact, the most pessimistic ones in the room were the newly arrived visitors spiraling downward in their own concerns. This is thinking. You told me they knew Tamelia, but are they going to be this open about it? The young man stared at his friend, attempting to convey his increasingly irritated feelings through his eyes. She only replied with a panicked expression as she fumbled with her bowl, trying to conjure up a suitable answer. What of the monk and the boy? Dieter didn't look up from his plate as he continued to eat his meal. I didn't see their bodies alongside the road, so I'm certain they didn't kill one another. Jaharl drummed his fingers on the table in an effort to hide his relief at the changing conversation. They have different rooms. Malam is on the 5th floor, and Ripson is on the one below it. Us 4 will share one. Tamelia leaned against the table, exhaling steadily as she did. Though they're not expecting more people, they prefer not to give away so many rooms to one group. Okay. Kapow. Perfectly fine. Josephine scraped off the sauce of the remaining meat she had. Maybe Ripson will cool off with a proper night of rest. He hasn't slept more than a wink or so since he joined us. He pretends to sleep, but he'll just sit there and meditate. Her husband hounded down a couple spoonfuls of beans. It's a couple spoonfuls of beans. He needs to get some sleep, or he'll go mad chasing his own damn shadow all the time. Wait, he hasn't been sleeping? Tamelia shot a questioning look at the two farmers before turning to her friend. Didn't he sleep last night? He shook his head. He was meditating when I went back to the tent. He's been needing to get some sleep pretty much since he joined us. That's why I told him I couldn't just play night. That's why I told him he just couldn't. That's why I told him he couldn't just play night guard every time he offered to watch the whole night. Josephine rolled a few beans into the sauce and tried it. Her head bobbed from side to side as she chewed, but eventually scraped her tongue against the top row of her teeth. Not quite the taste I was hoping for. Anyway, tell me you two noticed that, please. Tell me you two noticed that, please. They shook their heads sheepishly. Sorry, I didn't. We didn't think an oaf like that would be so hard on himself. The farmer covered his mouth as he coughed, masking a chuckle, while also drawing a look from his wife. Oaf that he may be, it does all of us a good to be in the company of those willing to speak out and help correct behavior that is harmful to ourselves. Jaharl grunted, crossing his arms. And if he doesn't listen, or better to say that won't listen? And if he doesn't listen, or better to say that he won't listen? What someone else does, how they react, isn't your concern. It's all about how you hold yourself accountable, or don't. Do the right thing, like voicing your concern, your care for a friend, a neighbor, or a stranger. And when they do lash out, it'll be more of a reflection on their spirit than yours. I know I would rather surround myself with people who would rather try to protect me than leave me to my own devices, despite whatever wrathful feelings I may harbor. If you can't tolerate that, you may be best suited to live the life of that of a hermit, like Eovir, or to return to Mahri and never leave. That sounds like a lot more work for those who care than those who don't. It is. The old man hurriedly finished a bite before waiting on a reply from Jaharl. Sounds like a disaster if too few end up caring. It is something of a damning precipice. Once the threshold is crossed, the drop soon follows. That's a gloomy way to put it. Tamelia frowned as she pushed her empty plate from side to side. It's an important pattern to recognize. Use it well, and you may avoid trouble in groups, large and small. It may even help you dodge the dangers of societal upheaval. I'll keep that in mind. Jaharl turned to an approaching guard. Should we be heading to our room? The guard gave a curt nod to the 3 others. Not at all. I was ordered by the captain to forewarn you of the noise to come, but to also invite you to the top of the tower to witness the bridge's, how to put it. The four looked at the guard as he scratched his head under the cover of his simple iron helm. The lingual puzzle piece seemed out of reach to him. Farmer placed his hand on top of his wife's. Now, this bridge, if it's anything like Cloat Holes, recedes into the ground on this side, like a turtle hides its head in its own shell, correct? The guard's eyes shifted to the right, his head tilted slightly upward as he looked up, as though his pupils were latched to some invisible object directly above his head. That is correct. It's much like a turtle. Either way, the captain invites you to watch it with him on the top of the tower. Tamilia and I will go, but if you two are tired, maybe some rest would be better. No, we'll go as well. Dieter turned to the guard. Thank you for informing us. Let the captain know we'll join him up there shortly. The guard sharply saluted and spun around in a tight circle. He swiftly departed the room, disappearing as the door closed behind him. The farmer and his wife hastily finished their meals. Afterward, Jaharo collected the dishes and placed them in the center of the table. After the farmers gathered their belongings, the four exited the dining room back into the small hallway that ringed around the inner room. They were first greeted by a pair of large wooden doors leading outside. Lit candles, periodically placed through the hall, kept the lower levels somewhat illuminated as the younger pair navigated the four to the left quickly reached a staircase that jut inward from the outer wall. The steps, made of the same stones as the tower, spiraled upward and slowly narrowed with the circumference of the building as it reached toward the sky. The middle portion of the stairs, on the lower stories, grooved downward and smoothed out, but the higher the climb, the less pronounced the wear and tear became. Each floor mirrored one another, but instead of the dining room, more doors populated the halls for all the spare rooms for temporary guests. Once they reached the 6th story, the group stopped at a square platform. A lonely, sturdy wooden ladder led up to a trapdoor with a large iron loop latched, though it beckoned for the group to ascend. Jarl climbed up first. Once he got to the door, he gave it a push, but it didn't open. He locked his left arm around a rung, braced his forearm against the door, and pushed it again, this time using his legs as well. The door whipped open halfway, but stopped at the extremity of his reach. He freed his arm and climbed the remainder of the way up, while still using his right arm to force it open. The door slammed into the roof, drawing the notice of the four people on watch. The young man helped the others to the top of the tower, while under the gaze of the men already there. Once they were all together, Dieter closed the door behind them. The roof of the tower housed a massive brazier filled with coal and wood, and around the battlements, piles of wood spilled inward, open to the elements. Two set of 4 pillars, each in the shape of a square, helped keep a ceiling shaped like a thick ring aloft. The four gazed out over the landscape spread out before them. The colors of the sunset stained the sky above and bled onto the lands and snow below. Tamilia bounced from one section to another, eyeing the forests to the east and then the ones to the north, as well as a large patch to the southwest. Jaharl and the farmers were much more reserved in their responses. They pointed in the direction of Faladne and turned in what they believed to be in the direction of Samin, approximately off to the west. Standing off to the side, the captain, dressed in leathers and a checkered gambeson, clutched his mantle and held it to one side. He let go of his cape and approached the four after allowing them some time to appreciate the view. Greetings, guests of Grail Tower. I am the captain and commander here. My men simply call me captain, and you may as well for simplicity's sake. However, as formalities dictate, I am Captain Herod Salern. A pause followed before Jahara willed himself to step forward. He pointed to everyone as he briefly carried through introductions. I am Jaharl, and this is Tamilia. We are from Rahri. The older pair with us are from the farmland south of Cloval. We have 2 others traveling with us, a boy from Samin, Malam, and a monk from the monastery of Atumu named Ripson. Captain Herod politely nodded in recognition of each of the 4. Then, when he heard of the 2, I am like losing my reading ability. I'm losing it. Ugh. When he heard of the absent two, he glanced over to one of his men and whispered to him, "The boy's truly Malam. Am I right in hearing that?" "He is." And Jaharl and the others stood a little taller, like a needle had pricked, not too deeply, the small of their backs. Miracles and the echoes of Saedra's calling. Blessed news indeed. The captain clapped a heavy hand on Jaharl's shoulder, causing the young man to dip down from the force. Some time back he passed through in a carriage with some old driver. Poor man. Tamilia dislodged the words from her throat. "What happened to the driver?" A deep breath steadied the captain's demeanor before his green eyes locked with hers. "Butchered. I had barely left us, heading east, when one of our spotters in the nest up here witnessed the attack." Jaharl's and Tamilia's eyes widened as the pair traded worried glances. I'm trying to fit in words that aren't there. For whatever reason. Jaharl's and Tamilia's eyes widened as the pair traded worried glance for worried glance. The Saul escaped toward Fulil, but we didn't have the proper resources to mount a hunt. And when we found the old man's body, we could only offer up prayers to the Blessed Mother to spare the boy. Josephine sidestepped from behind Jaharl and away from the group a little to get a clearer look at the man's face. "Did you meet with Malam at all, or was he only passing through?" The captain cocked his head, dwelling on the question as he dug through his recollections. "I didn't have a detailed conversation with him, if that's what you're asking. I have far too many responsibilities to talk with every visitor or passerby. What I do recollect is when they arrived early in the morning, they had intentions of reaching Philodne for a night or two before heading up to Dol Air. At least, that is what I was told by some of my men after we dealt with the attack." "Thank you." Josephine shifted back to her husband's side. "Of course. We try to clear out any roving Saul we see, but they generally keep far enough distance away and in large enough numbers that a rider or two isn't quite enough to shoo them away for good. Maybe you should try more bows." Tamilia pointed at the swords and spears held by the other guards and the captain. Josephine dispatched some of them from some 40 paces away, like lightning striking from above. "So I've heard," ignoring the urge to smartly retort to such a juvenile suggestion. Captain Harad leaned to one side. Ignoring the urge to smartly retort to such a juvenile suggestion, Captain Harad leaned to one side to better judge the old woman. Not to say I doubt such a claim, but the sweet news of Saul being given such a proper gift is unexpected. May I ask to see such skill tomorrow morning? Josephine remained in her spot. "I wouldn't call killing those poor men a skill. Perhaps in those lovely fields of Clohall, you do not have the problem we do. The Saul are nothing more than thieves and murderers, like rats that have found their way into the granary." This time, Dieter stepped forward. "That may be true. Our farmlands are relatively peaceful. However, ever since we started traveling Perel, we've been dealing with one problem after another. Glory to Saedra, to bless your lives with such peace, yet also the dexterity and strength to protect yourselves when needed." The captain moved close to the farmer and patted his upper arm. "It seems like we're certainly blessed by her." Josephine smiled at her husband, who choked back a groan. "Well, I don't particularly mind showing you my shooting. It's nothing fancy." "Excellent." Captain moved toward the southern wall and peered down at 2 lines of men who stood on opposite sides of the road on the western side of the ravine. Then he turned to the 4 guests he left behind. "Though you may have seen this elsewhere, it is no less a marvel to see. Come, watch as the great bridge of Perel disappears." The group joined Captain Harad and cautiously leaned against the wall to observe what was about to occur. "Men, bring it in." I'm getting into a comfy position. The men below heard the bellowing command of their leader and positioned themselves in lines behind 2 square obelisks of stone. They latched 3 thick steel bands onto the stone as a rope was tied to each band and joined into one thick long braid. Once all the men were in place and their grip firm, One man from each line broke away and met in the middle of the road. They began clapping in unison, forming a somewhat plodding rhythm. Though they were far too high to hear from the guards, the captain and his men in the nest sang softly, joining their own words with those below, as though they were all gifting the song as a promise to Saedra to do all that was capable of them, despite all difficulties and possible setbacks. Born one day, and this is all it took, to have no sway and no nose in a book. Doesn't matter now, the reason or the how. Breakfast in the morning, dinner at night. Palace I wasn't born in, now I gotta fight. Doesn't matter now, the reason or the how. Drink when we're thirsty, eatin' eggs and bread, hurtin' in our 30s, rest our empty heads. Doesn't matter now, the reason or the how. Blessings to all of us, Sages made us whole. No need to fuss, let's protect our home. Doesn't matter now, the reason or the how. They repeated the song 2 more times, with grunts and clapping intermingling with the chant to help them maintain the rhythm. Along the sounds and songs pouring from the men, muffled clicks of metallic gears. Muffled clicks of metallic gears clanked from under the road. A series of toothed wheels rotated, assisting the guards in retracting the stone slab of a bridge into the dirt on the western cliffside. 2 guards on each side departed the pulling lines. One in each pair pulled a small handcart full of sand and buckets of water. The others tossed sand into the holes along with the road and followed the sand with water to assist the movement of the stone bridge. Jarl watched in amazement at the feat and tapped his foot to the beat of the captain's soft singing. Tamilia, on the other hand, paid more attention to McCall, fully disappearing beneath the horizon. Dieter and Josephine seemed more interested in simply enjoying the view from so high above the ground as they gazed out into the distance to the south while glancing below periodically. While they were preoccupied with those views, 2 of the guards lit pieces of wood and gently placed them into the brazier. Smoke billowed out of the center opening of the ceiling ring as a cacophony of cackling and hissing filled the air. Even though the group stood by the tower's edge, the fire's warmth eventually began to caress their backs. The elderly couple were the first to move away from the wall and head back to the room. Tamilia followed to show them where they were resting for the night. Even after the evening sky firmly took hold, Jahar made no effort to return down into the tower. He drifted from one side to another, staring upward before peering below, trying to discern anything from a rock to a hill to a person. Aside from the noise of the fire, the young man ignored the conversation the guards were having. Nothing came to his mind, not due to lack of thinking or frustration. He looked outward and allowed the sights, sounds, and smells to fill his senses. For an instant, the world became still, and he felt a peace similar to when he plucked at his instrument in the small clearing back at Mahri. He inhaled slowly, as a sense of cold air filled his lungs, crossed with the warmth he felt from the fire, like an airy estuary. For some time the young man experienced his own meditation, becoming closer to the moment and detaching himself from all his concerns and his bitter discontent toward fate. It is a lovely sight, isn't it? Captain Harad appeared beside his entranced guest. The words broke Jahar from his reverie. He did a double take at the captain, not realizing the man was so near. I'm sorry, what now? Lovely, isn't it? Probably like the mountains out east, but a little different, without all the trees about, I'd wager. He waved his arm wildly, gesturing to the darkened fields below, and the starry sky above. It is a little different, but no less stunning in its own way. A diplomatic answer, if I ever heard one. Jarl frowned. It does remind me of home, of Mahri, that is, Captain Solern. A faint smile formed on the captain's face. Then I think you answered my question, though somewhat indirectly. I guess? His frown worsened. The captain turned to face the young man more directly. Outside of Cyrus, your village is representative from what I recollect. Only 2 others have come through here, hailing from Mahri in a long, long time. Icy prickling dashed down Jaharl's spine. Oh, were they heading home? They left for Saedra's calling. They were heading west when we last saw them, which was during summer. As far as I'm aware, they have not returned this way to head home. Give a reason quick. Thank goodness, we were going... Why are you heading west, Jaharo of Makri? The question stabbed out of the captain's mouth, word after word, prodding for an opening to understand why 2 more Makrians were passing through his post. Well, we had hopes of running into Vanine and Hardwin along the way. Jaharo pivoted to face the captain more directly. We were going to meet them and go to the capital, but Tamelia and I were held up at home. Why is that? The captain's gaze did not waver. Careful. Duties at home. More work to do than usual. No attacks from Oltean spies, I hope? He shook his head, nearly making himself dizzy. No, the Olteans made no efforts to invade through the mountains, at least not near Makri. We had to deal with the typical harvests and preparations for winter. There's a lot of work for us, especially when people leave the village. I see. The captain thoughtfully considered what he had been told as he massaged his temple with his ring finger. So you plan to meet up with your friends and visit Cyrus? That is correct. He is Tamelia's uncle. The village thought it'd be good for him to get news of Vanine and Hardwin receiving the blessing or receiving Sage's blessing, and also enjoy some time with his niece. It would also allow Tamelia and myself a chance to visit the kingdom. We rarely have the opportunity to do so. I did have a lute I was hoping to play and learn some music, but it broke in the attack. His words trailed off as the moment the attacker struck his lute flashed before his eyes. A pity, but you do realize the 2 of you together is a bit worrying. Captain's eyes softened slightly. To make a mockery of Sage's calling would earn you 2 a punishment, both gross and justified. Tamelia and I are not like that. We and Makri know what would befall, not only us, but our village, if we were to turn Sage's calling into some game where the pieces and parts can be changed at will. He scratched at his forearm. The taste of bitterness flooded his senses. Forgive my prodding with a forked tongue, young Jaharo. A gaiety peppered the captain's words. His figure loosened, and the rigid tension from only a moment before evaporated. There are only a few things in life we can choose to take seriously. Mahri shares the same banner as all under Perail, even if we border Olteo. The young man's body tightened. His innards felt knotted, constricting like a snake. It's always good to hear. The captain fought back a yawn. I will take my leave, unless you have need for me. He coughed in an effort to ease his tightening chest. No. Thank you, Captain Solarin. I'll probably enjoy the roof. We call it the nest. Built better for birds than people, but it works for our purposes. Jaharo choked out a laugh. All right, I'll enjoy what the nest has to offer for a little while longer, as long as your men don't think I'm in their way. You'll be quite all right, as long as you don't go about shouting or acting the fool. He politely bowed and departed for the door. When he was partially down the ladder, he stuck his head above the nest's floor. Don't forget to shut this when you head down. Falls enough to hurt someone terribly if they're unlucky enough. Thank you for the reminder, Captain Solarin. He watched the man reach up to the hatch, which was now being held by one of the guards, who was helping close the door. With a soft thud and a brief exchange of looks between the guard and the Mokrian, the young man once again found himself staring toward the sheet of stars. He became like a drop in the vastness of the sky before him, which touched and flowed through him, assuring him he was not alone, nor would he be while facing fate. With a soft sigh, he found an accessible portion of the northern battlement and leaned against it. The cold of the stones slowly seeped through his clothes, but in that moment's eternity, it felt comforting. He tilted his head up even more, and, for a blink of an eye, a shooting star, like a cut on the face of the universe, flashed and vanished. One of Liana's messengers? After today, the promise of safe travel is a welcomed one. And that is the end of chapter 27. Dun, 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 dun. So, whew, gracious. So, yes, now we're actually starting getting to people who are a bit more invested into Saedra's calling, and so there are much more, we'll say, people wondering what's the deal with this. This is mighty peculiar that there are two of you from the same village going to these places. What's the deal? What's the dealio? So that is what's going on. Index. There was. Okay, so yeah, just mentioning like Liana's messengers or shooting stars. Some people refer to them like that. Some people don't. Liana and her guidance. Earlier mentioning in the chapter. Is a phrase used to give thanks when someone has been able to navigate through a troublesome time or situation. Not always, but at least just with some people who are a little bit more inclined to say it that way. So, yeah. That is it for today. So we're on page 317, and that is just a little bit more than 100 pages to go, 115 pages. Yeah, there's not much more to go. I have to work Saturday, so I will read Sunday next week, so the 27th, at the same time. At least that's what I'm anticipating. So we got, and it'll be chapters 28, 29. Let's see here. And 30. That's what we'll do. 28, 29, and 30 will be the next reading. And that'll get it pretty close. It'll put it at 351 or so. It'll be getting pretty close to the end of it. So, yes, that is it. That's what I got. So, yeah, thank you for watching, listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and yeah, should be some good times, we'll say. So, yeah, no problem. It is good to do. Plus, it gives, not even just to do it, but also, be like, oh, okay, I probably need to change some things here. I feel those chapters outside of a couple little oddities. I feel those are. I liked them. I feel a bit better about those than I did last week's readings. Those couple chapters felt a little meh to me. I was a little disappointed in myself. It's like, I could have cleaned this up a lot better, and we'll do so. So, thank you. I will have a good birthday. I will enjoy so, and I will certainly try to have a good weekend. You do the same. So, except for the birthday part. Not your birthday. So, that is it. Toodaloos, and yeah. Bye.